She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Tonight, why did a former professor go on a deadly shooting rampage in Las Vegas? The latest on the investigation. Plus, Norah O'Donnell talks to twins who survived the Holocaust. As tensions escalate in the war, their message about remembrance on the CBS Evening News.
We have to stand with our allies all across the world.
And if the Democrats are willing to work with us on a solution to solve that crisis and protect America's national security right here at home, I think this can get done.
The Attorney General committed fraud. This whole case is the fraud. It's election interference.
Hi, I'm Scott McFarland in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. The Biden administration says Congress must take action on approving more aid for Ukraine and more aid for Israel. Yesterday, the Senate failed to advance a bill which would have provided billions of dollars in foreign aid. Republican lawmakers are still pushing for immigration policy changes as part of a deal. President Biden says he's willing to make, quote, significant compromises on the border. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now. Seems like the White House is opening the door, Nancy. How much are they cracking it open?
They are opening the door, Scott, but they are not exactly inviting Republicans in. In fact, just today, when I asked the White House press secretary whether it was time for the White House to start negotiating directly with Republicans, as some Republicans have been arguing they should, Karine Jean-Pierre said, no, it's not time for that. The two sides should continue to work with each other on Capitol Hill to get past this impasse. Take a listen.
There have been bipartisan negotiations taking place for weeks in the Senate. Are you saying that that's the proper venue for this discussion, not discussions between Senate Republicans and directly with the White House?
The negotiations has been happening and should be happening with Republicans and Democrats in Congress. That's what should be happening. And we want to continue for them to have those conversations. But they're not moving forward in good faith. They're just not.
So the White House talking tough right now. What we do know, Scott, is that the talks are back on, which is a good sign. In the Senate, Republicans delivered their latest proposal to the Democrats who have been involved in this bipartisan negotiation over border security. The Democrats are now reviewing it. And my understanding here at the White House is that they're watching to see what Republicans propose as well, because they are not willing to wade into these negotiations, as everyone assumes they would eventually have to get to some kind of deal that that changes border security policy in any way. But they want to wait to see whether Republicans are going to be more willing to come closer to a place that they're comfortable with before they get involved.
In a moment, we're going to press Senator John Thune of South Dakota on whether the White House should get involved. But a good update now from the White House North Lawn from Nancy Cordes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota joins us now. Senator, we're grateful for the time, and I want to start off with the big pressing issue of the week. How real is the prospect, the risk, that Ukraine aid is not approved by the end of the month?
I think it's entirely up to the Democrats here in the Senate, Scott. Honestly, right now, we're prepared. We have a number of Republican senators who are prepared to support Ukraine and their fight to defend their freedoms and sovereignty, to help Israel. And it's a fight against the terrorist organization Hamas, and to support the Taiwan and all the threats, that national security threats that we face in the Indo-Pacific, but not at the expense of leaving our southern border unprotected. And so that's the issue right now. And if the Democrats are willing to work with us on a solution to solve that crisis and protect America's national security right here at home, I think this can get done, at least through the Senate before the holidays. But it's going to take that. It's going to take some people who are really willing to come to the table in the next few days.
It would seem to be a very bad look for all of Congress to go home for the holidays without tidying up Ukraine aid.
And I don't disagree with that, which again is why I've said all along, we're prepared to have that vote, but we've got to have a border security piece in this package. If it's a national security package, we have a national security crisis at our southern border, 10,000 to 12,000 people every single day coming into the country illegally that are apprehended, another 1,000 or so that are what we call gotaways. This is a major crisis. I mean, Chris Wray said this week in front of a Senate committee that the lights are all blinking red and everywhere he turns. And I think that should be a warning to all of us that we have to protect our homeland, and in addition to supporting our national security interests in other places around the world.
Well, let's drill into that issue of border security as part of this package. You know, we're a few weeks away from the first of those deadlines to keep the government open, to prevent a shutdown. Why not put it on one of those spending bills, maybe the Homeland Security spending bill in a few weeks, versus tying it necessarily to Ukraine, which is something the Democrats in the Senate say is unnecessary and political?
I don't see it that way. This is a national security supplemental package. There will be other funding bills that come down the road. But the Democrats have to confront, and they don't want to, and I get that. That's not in there. This is not something they want to do. But it's something we need to do for the good of the country. And I hope that they'll come to the conclusion that the best way to accomplish that is in the context of Ukraine package. The second point I would make about that is this has also to get through the House. To get Ukraine aid through the House, it's going to take something on there to attract House Republicans to vote for it. And that, in my view, is going to be a strong border security. Just about the Senate, it's also about getting this through the House and on the President's desk. It's going to take some work to get there, but I think there's a path forward. I know that there are conversations going on even right now trying to solve this crisis, and I think that's in the best interest not only of Democrats but Republicans here in both the House and the Senate, and the American people who are demanding a solution at the southern border.
Let's talk more about that. There's been some optimism from the Senate negotiators at times this week. There may be optimism next week. You all can put together a deal. You know, just a year ago, you put together a deal on gun control. But let's assume there's a compromise that the Senate ekes out on border security. What indication do you have any of that would ever pass muster with House Republicans who have that little 3 to 4 seat majority and are particularly emphasizing a hard line on immigration?
Well, it won't pass in the House without Democrat votes, which is why President Biden is going to, at some point, have to weigh in this discussion. But what I will tell you is if you want to optimize the Republican vote in the House for this supplemental package, it has to have border security in it. If it doesn't, then you've got a lot of folks over there on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, who probably have a hard time getting to a yes vote on Ukraine. But if you send them a package that has a strong Republican vote in the Senate, that gives them political cover, obviously, in the House. And, clearly, the bigger vote we get, the more Republicans we get on the package here in the Senate, the stronger the border security piece is. I think the more likely it is that you can secure the requisite number of votes in the House to ultimately get this on the President's desk. Absent that, I don't know how that happens. And so that's I think the dynamic that everybody has to think about here, and why the White House is going to have to engage on this. The President's going to have to at some point help deliver votes in the Senate and in the House for a package to conclude those 4 components.
We saw some test votes or some symmetrical votes in the House recently, which indicated there are several dozen House members who are just firmly against funding Ukraine. As a member of leadership, do you have a sense of how many Republican senators are in that camp of just firmly against funding Ukraine?
We have a contingent of Republican senators, just like they do in the House of Representatives, which is why, again, to get anything done in the Senate, you've got to have a bipartisan solution. It's going to take votes from both sides to get anything across the finish line. And that's true in the House. I mean, the House is going to have to get Democrat votes to pass anything hard. And, if you look at what the job he has in front of him, clearly it's not an easy one. But I think if we can get a vote out of the Senate that has a good, strong Republican vote, it enhances the prospects that you can get more Republican votes in the House. There's a contingent in the House, just like there is in the Senate, on Ukraine, who will probably never get there. But I think you enhance the prospects of passage if you have a good, strong border security component included in this legislation.
Real quickly, what are the prospects of the Senate actually wrapping up its work next week? That's what it says on the calendar. Wondering if that's actually going to hold true.
Yeah, I'm still hopeful and optimistic, but that's kind of my nature. You have to be around here. I'm also a realist. I know we've got a lot to do, but I feel like, at least right now, there is a potential path forward on this border security piece and the discussions that are currently going on that we could get to a result. And if we do, if we can put something together by next week, I think we could actually move it across the floor of the Senate the following week. And you know, what the House does with it, the House may not be in town, but at least we would have a product out there that could eventually, hopefully, get signed into law by the president. But we want to make sure we're doing our part in the Senate, and the goal, obviously, is to try and get this done before the holidays.
From the Russell U.S. Senate building, Senator John Thune. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be with you.
Former President Trump returned to hear testimony at his company's civil fraud trial. Next, a look at his legal troubles and how it impacts his White House bid. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
This whole case is the fraud. It's election interference. It's keeping me here instead of Iowa and New Hampshire.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Donald Trump outside the courtroom of his New York civil fraud trial. The former president, two of his sons, and his company are accused of a decades-long fraud scheme centered around inflating the value of their company. Trump is expected to take the stand in that case in that courthouse on Monday. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins us now. What in the world is that going to look like?
Well, he's been there before. He's testified earlier. He'll testify again. And let's get a couple of things clear. He doesn't have to be there. As a matter of fact, being there helps him in Iowa and New Hampshire because it continues his long-running argument that he is a victim of some kind of illegitimate, politicized prosecution, even in a civil case. So he doesn't have to be there, but it helps to be there because it radiates that message, point one. Point two, politically, the Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley campaigns will tell you this. Every day that Donald Trump is in a courtroom or near a courtroom or thinking about going in a courtroom, it freezes the media space in which they operate. So politically, it is advantageous, not disadvantageous for former President Trump. This case is basically about, is there a victim? Well, the banks say they're not victims. Well, let's remind ourselves, those banks are in court testifying about a former president who might be, again, a future president. How eager do you think they're going to be, Scott, to say, yes, the former president defrauded us? This is a question of, do you need to be a forensic accountant to go through and peel back Trump Organization financial statements, or are they consistent with existing and established business practices in New York? New York Attorney General says they aren't, and that's fraud. We'll see.
Next trial up is a criminal trial. It's
Yes.
the one set for March 4th, the 2020 election conspiracy trial, which has all kinds of tethers to January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's team made an argument today, which clearly is trying to push that case back. Explain what they're arguing, what they're trying to do.
Quickly, the president's attorney said he has absolute immunity from any prosecution because he's a former president. And, oh, by the way, since the Senate did not convict him in an impeachment trial, he can't be judged on any of these things. The trial court judge said, no, that's not true. They're appealing that absolute immunity declaration and related double jeopardy. They're saying while the appeals court considers that, they're not going to be responsive to anything, and nothing should go forward in this case until that is decided. That jeopardizes any movement in getting things done procedurally back and forth. It may even jeopardize the March 4th trial date, which, of course, has been the Trump attorney's approach all along. Delay, delay, delay.
And this seems to invite and expedite a review by the appeals court or the Supreme Court if they take this strategy of, we're not going to honor you, local judge, anymore.
Be careful of the questions you ask in a legal context. This is uncharted waters, to be sure. But if you ask these questions and you get an authoritative answer back that you don't like, that doesn't mean you don't have to comply.
Yeah. Ultimately, some of this has the potential of having a political impact on Trump. A trial, a criminal trial in which he appears every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the arguments, the prosecution's arguments, are illustrative, kind of inflammatory. Any indication from what you've seen over the last few months, any of this endangers him politically in the party, in the primaries that'll be ongoing during a trial?
So very clearly, the former president has won the indictment spectacle part of this. That doesn't mean he will win the public relations game in terms of evidence submitted and a possible conviction. Those are when the teeth of justice actually begin to clamp down. And you have to reconcile what you've said publicly and what you can actually prove in a court of law. We don't know that. And there is a sense among Republicans, a kind of fearful, tremulous sense that because he won the PR game in the indictments, he's going to win throughout. We still don't know, and I'm not prepared to offer a prediction.
It wasn't accidental, I suspect, that last night in the debate we heard Vivek Ramaswamy make a conspiracy theory statement that January 6th was an inside job. He read the room and thought that was the right room for that message. What do you make of that?
It's false. It's completely wrong. It is not consistent with any evidence submitted by anyone in a court of law. You know that, Scott McFarland, better than I do. Those who have been brought before the bench for their actions on January 6th have been looking in every direction to find some plausible, credible, evidentiary basis for that allegation, and they haven't submitted it. On their own behalf, they haven't submitted it.
You saw a political upside
They're
to
the ones who are most interested in trying to find this evidence and haven't. So Ramaswamy is becoming increasingly more reckless. To win the nomination? No. But to carve out some place for himself in the financial side of the Republican Party and its rhetorical flourishes about January 6th? Quite possibly, yes.
There's a lot there. There's a lot more coming to you. You just sense it, can't you? Major Garrett joining us on set. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We hear about polls constantly, but how are they created and why do they matter? Coming up next, CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us to explain. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows
We need to step up and help them.
and a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Politics isn't a game. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? Politics is about policy. Was this the right way to actually get this done? I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. I think I'm more interested in the answer than in the wind-up. It's not about me, it's about the issue. How will you handle that? When I became moderator of Face the Nation, I was very aware of not changing the heritage of the show. Why did you miss the moment? I started my career covering Wall Street. I did it for a decade, and I traveled around the world with secretaries of state, of defense, with presidents. I am a journalist, mother, the wife of a Marine, and frankly, someone who wants answers.
So do you think there is a communication problem here?
To be moderator of Face the Nation is not an anchor, it's not an actress. You are up here to moderate a conversation. That means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
Welcome back to America Decides. During every election cycle, hours of coverage are devoted to who's up and who's down in the latest polling. The candidates at last night's debate had to achieve a certain amount of support from multiple electoral polls. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now to explain how those polls are created and what you should pay attention to when you're looking at the results. Hey, Anthony.
Hey there, Scott. Yes, it is that special time of year. I'm talking, of course, about seeing all these poll numbers coming out. And look, in this episode of our Polling Explainers, we're talking specifically about the likely voter, just in time, of course, for voting to start up, and about how it makes the polls you're about to watch so different. So I want to start with this. If I were to put up a poll about your attitudes or your personal situation, people see that and they nod, okay, that's interesting. But when I put up a poll like this one with a horse race, now the fireworks start. It always spurs debate. Some people go, oh, my side's winning. Some people say, no, that can't be right. And hold on a second. The fact is, people do look at election polls a little differently because there's rooting interest, small differences of 1 or 2 points can change the whole narrative, but mostly because this contains a behavioral component. That is what people are going to do, in this case, vote or not do, and that's built in. So that's when we start talking about the likely voter. By the way, this happens in business. It happens around the world every day. Some people might like the new car in the ad they see, but will they buy it? It's an economic question. Consumer confidence might be up, but will people spend money? These are all things we have to deal with. So in the elections world, the likely voter estimate is often a reason why one poll can be different from another. Most polls start this by asking people, straightforward, okay, how likely are you to vote in the election? This can rule out some people who aren't likely, and the people who say they're very likely, very often, actually do show up. The ones in the middle here can be a little more marginal. So one of the things we can do is look at what people have done in the past. This becomes an important part of ours and other likely voter models. If you look on a public voter file and you see, for example, that people have voted in, let's say, the last two elections, 2018, 2020, and 90% of them then voted in the subsequent, say, midterm after that, you can give that person in the poll a weight, a likely voter weight of 0.9. That reflects their generalizable chance of showing up based on past behavior. But that might be different from someone who voted only in 50% of recent elections. They might get a likely voter weight of 0.5. So you need to take into account that, but also, of course, new voters and what they might do. All of that, I hope, gives you the idea that this is a difficult thing to do in polling. There's a little bit of art and a little bit of science. Anytime you encounter a model, you're building a model of an electorate or behavior. This is especially important politically because it's an era in which so few people cross party lines, right? You get more than 9 in 10 Republicans vote for Republicans, Democrats voting for Democrats. And so persuasion, while important, can often not be as important as turnout. Yes, the old cliche, it all comes down to turnout, but that's built into these polls. And so when you see things like last time in the midterms, when polling showed that if Democrats turned out more, they'd keep the House close, which in fact they did. That beat a lot of expectations, that beat a lot of punditry. That was where good polling data comes in handy. And you see the effects that that can have both in a poll and in real life when it all comes down to turnout. So that's a bit about how likely voter modeling works. And again, it's going to be important because the difference is when people start parsing 1 or 2 points, sometimes more, in the polling you're about to see is often because of differences in the way that pollsters model the electorate. And you should ask your pollster, how did you come up with this? How did you do this? And the good pollster should be able to explain it. That's one of the things everybody watching should demand as we go into this election season. Scott?
That was a very good explanation. Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. This week, 2 IRS whistleblowers in the Hunter Biden investigation testify behind closed doors on Capitol Hill. IRS Supervisor Gary Shapley and IRS case agent Joseph Ziegler also provided new records, which were publicly released by the GOP-led committee there. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge spoke to the whistleblowers in their first joint TV interview. Catherine joins us now. What are we learning about these 11 pages of emails?
Well, Scott, good to be with you. The newly public emails were sent between 2010 and 2019. The GOP-led committee claims they were sent by Joe Biden using at least 3 aliases when he was vice president or out of office to Hunter Biden and his business associates. The IRS whistleblowers again told CBS News standard procedures were not followed.
So there were multiple avenues, investigative leads that could lead to, it was former Vice President Joe Biden, that could lead to Joe Biden, that those were stopped.
Who shut them down?
So the assigned prosecutors on the case.
What was your experience, Gary, with these emails? Were you free to investigate them?
So, this is a piece of evidence, right? Pieces of evidence are put together to prove crimes. And this is just one of the things that we weren't able to investigate, we weren't able to collect in order to really understand the entire scope of where the investigation needed to go.
The whistleblowers said they did not uncover direct evidence. Asked about claimed interactions with his son's foreign business associates, President Biden told reporters this week, quote, "It's all lies," and then answered, "I did not," when asked if he had those interactions. The White House press office did not respond to additional questions from CBS News about the emails. The special counsel leading the investigation into the president's son declined to comment for our reporting, Scott.
What is the reaction from these IRS whistleblowers to the closed-door testimony from the special counsel, David Weiss, that he was the decision maker?
Well, in this case, we heard from Gary Shapley, and he said he stands by his testimony that Weiss told investigators he had asked the Justice Department for additional powers to prosecute the case and was denied.
So we have the luxury of knowing what actually happened in this investigation. Mr. Weiss also said in his testimony that he asked for or talked to Maine DOJ about special charging authority, and he was told to follow the process. And then it goes down through the process. And it goes, even though Attorney General Merrick Garland said a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney told Congress twice that, the Department of Justice talking point was that a Trump-appointed United States attorney was in charge. They made him go through 2 President Biden-appointed United States attorneys, both declining to partner with him.
And you're talking about attorneys in the Central District of California and then also here in Washington, D.C.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Special counsel David Weiss has filed felony gun charges in Delaware, and the Hunter Biden tax case is still pending. Scott.
Catherine Herridge, thank you very much. That does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key.